Hey, what's up, guys? This is Cody Brockway back with another episode of Brockway's Vinyl Bites. Yeah, that's always good news, right? So what we're doing today is we're talking about debut solo albums from people who were previously or currently at the time still in famous great bands. So basically, this is their first album, and maybe they had left the band they were in, or were still active in the band they were in, but deciding to do a solo venture at the same time. It happens a lot, so maybe there's a couple I've missed in my list, and if I have, please let me know in the comments. And if I haven't heard it before or don't own it, I will have to check it out. Okay, but I do know a lot. Anyway, let's get into the albums, okay? So the first one is going to be from 1975. That's right. It is Chris Squire's Fish Out of Water. This is easily good enough to be a Yes album, if you ask me. This album is just tremendous. It's only got, 6 or 7. Sorry, it's got 5 songs on it, but the songs are long, and it's just an awesome album. This is the remixed box set version done by Jaco Jaksik, if that's how you say his name. If you're watching this, Jaco, I'm so sorry. But this has former Yes guys Patrick Moraz and Alan White on. Alan White is on the single that's in the deluxe version here, Run with the Fox, but Bill Bruford plays on the rest of the album. So Bill Bruford, Patrick Moraz, Alan White all make appearances here, and like I said before, easily as good as a Yes album. This album is just fantastic, and I wish he made more solo records like this. He only made the one. He did separate stuff with, Billy Sherwood and Steve Hackett and stuff over the years, under different names like Squacket and Conspiracy, but this is actually the only solo Chris Squire record that we have. So, yeah, I love this album. Anyway, on to the next one, which is the first solo record from Mr. David Gilmour. Yeah, so this is kind of recorded in 1978 when I guess they were kind of doing The Wall at the same time, but he, many of you know that story, so he was kind of doing a lot of work on his solo record at the same time. 1978, so around the same time as The Wall. The Wall would come out the next year. But actually, some stuff that he had worked on for this album, at least one part got used for The Wall, and that was Incomfortably Numb. My favorite song on here is probably most people's favorite song. It's There's No Way Out of Here. But the album's really good. It's really decent, and especially if you're a Pink Floyd fan or David Gilmour fan, you should check it out. This is not my favorite David Gilmour solo album, but it is definitely a great start for sure. Next up, we're going with one of the guys on my t-shirt here. One of the Rush guys, yeah. We got Geddy Lee, My Perfect Headache. He's another one that just did a one and done. No more solo albums, because Rush would kind of pick right up after, this album came out in 2000, it was 2000. Neil Peart at the time, unfortunately had some really bad things going on in his life, family members passing away, and so he went on that bike ride. Y'all know about it. But basically, he went on a bike ride halfway across the world and just totally, was not part of the music scene for a solid couple of years there to sort of gather himself and deal with things that were going on for him. But in that time, Geddy Lee retreated and made a solo album, and this album is excellent. And now that unfortunately Rush is no longer, unfortunately, R.I.P. Neil Peart, I would love to see another solo record from Geddy Lee. I don't think it's going to be happening, though. He seems to be doing this book tour and all this and that. So, but one can hope, because this is a very good album. My Favorite Headache, Geddy Lee. Sorry for the glare. Next up, we're going into Genesis land for a while. So, every member of Genesis had a solo career, and most of them were very successful, and they were all good. Steve Hackett's first solo album came out in 1975. Genesis was technically still together, but Peter Gabriel had just left the band, and all the guys were sort of unsure about, the future of Genesis and what was going to happen next. Phil Collins went off and did the Brand X jazz fusion thing. Peter Gabriel would launch a solo career, which we're going to get to in a couple minutes here, but so did Steve Hackett, and he was still actively a member of Genesis at this point. This is kind of like people call this the Lost Genesis album because it has Steve Hackett himself, Mike Rutherford, Phil Collins. Then it also has his brother John Hackett, who was not in Genesis, of course, but he's playing flute, ARP synthesizer, and bells on this. This album it's an awesome album. I love every second of this album. I've seen Steve 7 times, and he always plays something from this album. I've actually interviewed him before too, and he's just awesome. He's just an awesome dude. Met him several times. He's fantastic. And this album, he's just one of the nicest guys, but he's a fantastic musician. And look at the artwork on this album. My God, just great. If you haven't heard this is Steve Hackett, Voyage of the Acolyte. If you haven't heard this, stop watching the video. Go listen to it right now, then come back. Next up, Mike Rutherford, Small Creeps Day. This came out in 1980, around the time that Genesis were recording Duke. So he was also still a member of Genesis at the time, but made a really decent solo album here. It's got Simon Phillips on drums and former Genesis member Anthony Phillips, not related to Simon Phillips, but he's playing keyboards, and really a great prog album. Unfortunately, he wouldn't keep up in this vein. The next album was not great, but this one is really worthy of your attention. Small Creeps Day, Mike Rutherford. Phil Collins, Face Value. Mega successful album, would launch a mega successful solo career, but he still was in Genesis at the time. He still stayed in the band, and actually they would go on to have mega success too. And he actually covered a Genesis song on here. He does sort of a Motown version of Behind the Lines, and arguably his signature song on here, In the Air Tonight. But this album is chock full of great material. If you haven't listened to this album in a while or haven't heard it before, I suggest you go check it out, because Face Value is indeed fantastic cover to cover. I like every track. It's got a great Beatles cover on it too. He does a cover of Tomorrow Never Knows at the very end. It's very good. All right. Tony Banks, A Curious Feeling. Yeah, we've got a Genesis segment going on here, but this has got also Genesis alumni on drums, Chester Thompson, who was part of the live Genesis thing going on, and he's also from the Mothers of Invention, Frank Zappa. A great album, Curious Feeling. Tony Banks is fantastic. The first song is called From the Undertow, and that was actually supposed to be the intro to the song Undertow, but they eventually got split up, and Undertow would go on a Genesis album, and this would open up his solo album, A Curious Feeling. Also produced by David Henschel, who was working with Genesis very closely at the time. That's Tony Banks, A Curious Feeling, 1979. And the last of the Genesis stuff here for me today is Peter Gabriel's first solo album. He would leave Genesis 2 years earlier, and he would come out with this in 1977. Some people just call this Car, because it's just kind of called Peter Gabriel. His first 4 albums are all called Peter Gabriel, so people just call them by what's on the cover. But this would have a massive song, Salisbury Hill. That was a big hit, and it would launch an epic solo career for him. He found a way to blend this perfect mix of prog, world music, pop, rock, all this together, and is still doing it to this day. He's got a new album coming out, I.O. If you haven't heard any of the singles from that, go check it out. But more about the Burgermeister, Salisbury Hill, Modern Love, Here Comes the Flood, Humdrum, Excuse Me, that's a funny song. Excellent album. We love Peter Gabriel around here. We're going heavy. We got David Lee Roth, See 'Em and Smile. Yeah. Leaves the biggest band of rock in the 80s and, gets Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan and Greg Bissonette in tow and creates this wonderful hard rock album. The best he would do outside of Van Halen. This album is really, really good. And just, the combo of Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan, mixed with the personality of David Lee Roth really sells this album. It is just very, very good. Look at that cover. My gosh. Oh, he was such a maniac. But we love him. Okay, sorry about that, but we're back. So this fella was in a very successful, influential metal band in the 70s, and unfortunately, he had some massive drug problems, and eventually, the guys in the band said, "We can't continue on with, if things are going to be like this, we need to clean up our act, and if you can't, you gotta leave." He would rejoin that band many, many years later, but this is Ozzy Osbourne. This is Blizzard of Oz. Came out in 1981. Of course, this has Crazy Train, which is the song that we've all heard tons and tons of times before, but it's got other great stuff too. Goodbye to Romance, Suicide Solution, I Don't Know, Mr. Crowley, No Bone Movies, Steal Away the Night, Revelation, Mother Earth. Crazy Train is actually not the best song on this album. This is just it's a pretty close to perfect album. Like, look at that. Just, the images on it are just awesome. Him laying there with a cross in his hand, laying on the floor like he's about to smack it down on the ground. Oh, and then we would also see the birth of guitarist Randy Rhoads happen with this album. Unfortunately, his life was cut way too short. After the next album, he would die in a helicopter crash or accident. Awful. But we would really see him sort of kind of change the way a guitar is looked at with a record like this, and the next one, Diary of a Madman. But what a way to start off a really successful solo career. He would sell millions and millions of albums after this. Excellent album. And we're going with more Black Sabbath alumni. So after Ozzy was kicked out, this guy was brought in as the singer, and he's fantastic. He did 2 records with them. He had also been in previously successful bands prior to being in Black Sabbath. Like, he was in Rainbow, then he was in Black Sabbath, then he would do a solo thing and come back to Black Sabbath and then do more solo stuff. Anyway, you know who he is. He's Ronnie James freaking Dio, man. Holy Diver. This is his first solo album with the Dio band, and this is one of the most classic metal albums. We got Stand Up and Shout, Holy Diver, Gypsy, Caught in the Middle, Don't Talk to Strangers, Straight Through the Heart, Invisible, Rainbow in the Dark, and Shame on the Night. Got Vivian Campbell on drums, and we've also got Vinny Appice on drums, who was part of Black Sabbath during the Mob Rules period. Jimmy Bain on bass, which he knew him from the Rainbow period, and it's kind of like a supergroup, actually, but this is an excellent. It's actually a metal masterpiece. But if you subscribe to my channel, you probably know that already. This album is just excellent. Holy Diver. That really changed things at the time. Super influential record. Okay, now we're nearing the end of my pile here. Now we're going to go back in time to the 60s, 70s. With the Beatles. Now, the Beatles would break up, and they would all have magnificent solo careers. And I'm going to start off with the first Ringo album. Like him or not, he was pretty influential to the Beatles sound, and I know, like this album, a lot of other Beatles actually wrote songs for him. Like Photograph was written with, him and George Harrison wrote that together, which is my favorite Ringo song. I'm the Greatest was written by John Lennon. You and Me was written by George Harrison. And Oh My, My, Oh My, My, that was written by Ringo himself. But 6 O'Clock is also a Paul and Linda McCartney track. And that's the track that closes the album. But this is his first solo album, and it sold millions of records and had a lot of hits on it. You're 16, You're Beautiful, and You're Mine was not written by any other Beatles. It was written by R. Sherman. Excuse me for not knowing, but it has a mouth sax solo from Paul McCartney. That's hilarious. Anyway, so lots of other Beatles contributed to this album and made a pretty decent album. Ringo's first solo album. McCartney 1. This came out technically while Paul was legally contracted, still legally a member of the Beatles on paper, even though they were really at the end of their career about to split up. And but this came out just a bit before Let It Be would release. And, you know, he plays everything on the album himself, him and Linda, pretty much. But, you know, we got lots of good tunes on here. We got That Would Be Something. We got Every Night. And one of his signature songs is on here. There'd be a live version of it that would come out and be a massive hit years down the road. That's Maybe I'm Amazed. Excellent album. And as you can see, that this is the half-speed mastered edition that came out a couple years ago. I'm a collector. Yeah, good album though. Good album. It's unique. It's probably not what anyone expected him to do at the time. And you know, he would do a couple more albums like this too. Obviously, he'd form Wings and do the be very successful again outside of the Beatles. But he did McCartney 1, 2, and 3, where he played all the instruments himself. And we got the Plastic Ono Band, the first one from John Lennon after he would leave the Beatles, and this album's got some pretty dark moments. It's a pretty honest record. It deals with him not really having a relationship with his parents. They kind of abandoned him when he was a kid, and with the song Mother, that song, well, Working Class Hero, I Found Out. This is also this is the big deluxe edition CD box that came out a couple years ago, and it's got the bonus tracks Cold Turkey, Give Peace a Chance, Instant Karma, We All Shine On, which were all massive hits. This has also got the Dolby Atmos surround mixes and a bunch of outtakes and demos and all that. But really good album. It's a really raw album. It's very emotional, and that's good. So the last one in the pile, I think you know what it is. Continuing on with the others that we have here. It's George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. This is the 8 LP Collector's Box Set vinyl edition. The 50th anniversary remix, where they basically took the Phil Spector wall of sound off in the mix, or turned it down. But oh my God, this album is awesome. This album's amazing. And the acoustic demos on this are easily good enough to, have been the actual album themselves. I'm not even kidding you. Lots of great songs on this, though. We got What Is Life, My Sweet Lord, I'd Have You Anytime. He did a couple of Bob Dylan covers on here, like Behind That Locked Door and If Not For You. But, the whole thing, even the Bob Dylan songs are just excellent. Yeah. Pretty much every song on this kicks ass. It's very good. Pretty spiritual album, and it's pretty, it feels good to listen to, It's one of those. It's just an excellent album. Yeah, All Things Must Pass. 1970 this came out, and this was the highest selling solo album by any Beatle. And I believe it still is to this day. We all know the success of McCartney and all that, but no, this one sold the most. It helps that it's a triple record too, right? But well, anyway, those are my picks for today's episode on debut solo albums of members that were in famous bands. So yeah, if I missed any, let me know. Drop them in the comments, and I'd love to hear from you. If you agree with my picks, let me know as well. And if you want to add more, like I said, please let me know. And if I haven't heard them, I'll check them out. So that wraps up today's episode of Brockway's Vinyl Bites. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell all your friends. We'll see y'all in the next video. Rock on! Goodbye.